Without encryption, we lose all privacy. That is the new battleground. That's what Snowden said in a Guardian article this week. Encryption is what protects our personal information in the digital age, and these days, close to 80% of all web traffic is encrypted. Your bank balance, the local hospital's equipment, and the 2020 US presidential election depend on encryption to keep them safe. And the number one threat in the world, according to the US intelligence community, is computer and computer network vulnerability, a bigger threat than terrorism and war. And yet, the US, the UK, and Australia are all actively working to undermine our computer security by forcing backdoors and fatal flaws into the encryption that we all use. This isn't a new battle. This is what the cypherpunks fought against in the 90s when the US government tried to subvert cryptography and tried to regulate encryption like a munitions export, trying to ban it for anyone outside of the US. Thank goodness the cypherpunks won back then, otherwise the internet never would have grown into what it is today. There would be no internet commerce without encryption, and people like reporters, dissidents, activists, NGO workers, whistleblowers, doctors wouldn't be able to do their jobs. And the lives of people all over the world, and especially in countries that are the most repressive and dangerous, would be even more at risk without encryption. But now the battle has begun again, and the Snowden revelations exposed that governments are actively undermining our online privacy. They've already cracked many types of encryption, and they're trying to force back doors into the types of encryption they haven't yet cracked. Australia has basically banned end-to-end encryption, and the White House is talking about it, and they're trying to force private companies to undermine their own security that they're providing for their customers. Yes, backdoors help governments catch the bad guys, but in the process, it renders all of our public infrastructure and our private lives permanently unsafe. That is not something we can allow. We need to push back against government backdoors, but also take proactive measures in our own lives to protect our own privacy from hackers and anyone who would try to use our data to do us harm. So today, I'm going to teach you about VPNs, an essential part of your toolkit if you want to live a modern, privacy-conscious lifestyle. And like many privacy tools, the more people who use these, the more it actually helps everyone's privacy, because it's a lot easier to hide in a group of 100 people than it is to hide in a group of 3. I'll explain what VPNs are and how they work, which VPNs have already been cracked by the government and which ones still seem effective, and what you should be looking for in a good VPN provider. VPN services can vary dramatically between providers, and not all of them are credible. Before we dive into the question of how safe is your VPN really, let's first understand what a VPN is. If you already understand this, feel free to skip ahead. VPN stands for Virtual Private Network, and it's a private network within a public network like the internet to connect remote sites or users together. Someone might set up one of these private networks for their employees who work remotely so that they could share data within a company securely whilst using the infrastructure of the internet. But VPNs don't have to be used just within companies. Anyone can use one if they don't want sensitive information like credit card numbers or IDs stolen. The VPN encrypts your data as it travels across the internet, which means that even if it's intercepted, it can't be read. VPNs can also protect your online activity from being recorded by your internet service provider, and they're often used to hide a user's IP address so that they can keep their geographic location private. VPNs mask your IP address because when your data leaves your computer, it first goes to your VPN server and only then goes out to the open internet and the site you're trying to access. Normally, you connect directly to websites from your modem's internet address, but if you pass through a VPN server first, the website only sees the VPN server and IP address. This means that if your VPN server is in another country, you can actually trick websites into thinking that it is you who is in the other country, because IP addresses over time have been mapped with varying degrees of accuracy to geographical locations. So some people use VPNs to spoof their location so that they can access sites that aren't available in their own country, like Netflix or crypto exchanges. So what should you look for in a good VPN? First rule, if it's free, you're probably getting what you paid for. As they say, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. And a lot of VPNs make their money by recording any unencrypted internet activity and then selling that data. Next, location. Actually, where the VPN provider is located doesn't help that much, despite what you may read on the internet. There are too many complex alliances for sharing data, like mutual legal assistance treaties. Even if a country isn't a member of the Five Eyes or the European Union, there is a lot of cooperation between law enforcement of different countries for handing over data. Of course, there is a scale of how privacy-friendly a country is in general, which is helpful to note. And in some countries, VPNs are illegal, such as in China and Russia. Other countries countries may require that VPNs report the activity on their servers and hand over logs to law enforcement, which is scary anyway, but even worse for people who live in countries where even reading the wrong book could get you in serious trouble with the government. But regardless of whether a country has strict reporting rules, there are some governments that very easily seem to be able to reach over into other jurisdictions and get the VPN data that they want. And as long as VPNs have that data in their possession, it puts a giant target sign on them, not just for governments, but for any hacker who'd want to access it. This leads me to the next important criteria for choosing a VPN. Look at their logging policies. You want one with no logging or low logging guarantees. This legally restricts a VPN from keeping your data past a certain period of time, which means that they couldn't even hand over the data if they wanted it if it's not in their possession. Finally, the tech that a VPN uses, in particular the encryption, is really important. As mentioned, VPNs vary greatly in the way that they're set up and the encryption that they use. And sometimes, even when a company's heart is in the right place, they might just not have the technical know-how to keep your data safe. And the security of your VPN also depends on actions that you take. VPNs rely on keys and the validity of the ciphers used. So if your keys get leaked or broken, your privacy's gone. So don't ever share or transmit your VPN keys. Let's move on to technical recommendations, and let's first start by looking at which encryption has already been compromised according to the Snowden revelations. The NSA's Office of Target Pursuit maintains a team of engineers dedicated to cracking the encrypted traffic of VPNs. The individual's online security isn't the priority of the NSA, so us individuals must fend for ourselves when protecting ourselves from malicious actors and hackers. But the more we try to protect ourselves from an increasingly hostile internet, the more the NSA works to try to undermine our efforts. This is a perverse relationship to have with an organization that calls itself the National Security Agency. By 2010, the NSA already had tools to attack the most commonly used VPN encryption schemes: secure shell, internet protocol security, secure socket layer encryption, point-to-point protocol. And if they have these tools, it means that other people do as well. The NSA also has a repository called ToyGrip, which contains collected data for VPN sessions, like fingerprints. These fingerprints contain all the information that your system broadcasts, like the browser you're using or specific plugins for that browser, that makes you identifiable as a unique user. The specific configuration of your machine and your web search setup is more unique than most people realize, and can help link web activity to a specific user, whether that data is being routed through a VPN server or not. So sometimes to increase your privacy, it's better to have the most bland default setting possible. Now, Snowden is the chairman of an organization called Freedom of the Press, and they have some great resources online for teaching people how to protect their privacy. And given the encryption vulnerabilities that we already know about, they recommend the following specs for your VPN. I'll also post these details below in the video description. So what does all that mean? Authentication is the process used to confirm that you are actually the VPN customer and not someone trying to impersonate you. The handshake sets the encryption keys for your VPN session, and a data encryption cipher uses those keys for the actual encryption of the data as it travels through a VPN connection. You can find out what the VPN specifications are on any VPN provider's website. According to Freedom of the Press, if they're not using these standards, they'd better have a good reason for it. They list 5 VPNs that currently fit their criteria. If you're interested in those, I have the link below. But the thing is, things change. I recommend keeping an eye on websites like theirs for updated information about security. Now, something important to consider: VPNs are essential for protecting your privacy from ISPs, hackers, and some of the services with which you interact online. And the more people who use these services, the better everyone's privacy becomes. Now, if you're trying to hide from nation-state actors, sometimes a VPN can actually draw attention to you, especially if you're using it in a place where VPN use is uncommon. Someone on Twitter once remarked that using these privacy-enhancing technologies can sometimes be akin to wearing the ring in Tolkien's novels. You become invisible to regular mortals, but suddenly you become much more interesting and visible to other powers. So the best thing that we could be doing in our society is making these privacy technologies ubiquitous. Encourage everyone to use them so that we can protect the privacy of society as a whole, and also help the people who do have reason to hide from nation-state actors for fear of persecution. Now remember, none of these things are foolproof, so understand understand the risk that you're taking. Our computer security right now is in critical danger. Now, we've come to expect a certain degree of privacy in our everyday lives, but we're living more and more of our lives in the digital world, and our digital privacy is under systemic attack. Now, it seems that some encryption is still uncrackable, otherwise the government probably wouldn't want to ban them so much. But banning or undermining the encryption that does remain is something that we cannot permit. It's been 6 years since the Snowden revelations, and in that time, Facebook, Google, and Apple have all made encryption a default part of their products. We can probably credit Snowden's revelations about mass surveillance for inspiring these kinds of proactive measures. Now, the government wants to undermine this, force them to add in backdoors, which would make our digital lives permanently unsafe in an increasingly hostile online world. We have to take a stand against this, and we also have to protect ourselves, and we can do this with one simple step at a time. If you're just starting to take these steps today, you can start by adding a VPN to your computer and your phone. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any privacy concerns or questions or tips, please leave them in the comment section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.